And away we go. Hello, good evening, everybody.
Hey
Welcome to
guys.
Hello.
another episode of Talking Geek Weekly with my illustrious co-hosts Fred Corder and Noel Blanco. And with us tonight, we have our special guest, Mr. Paolo Herras, who is the creator and pioneer of Comiket. And we have so much things we have on our mind to learn more about the work you've done for Comiket. And I know, Noel, you've had some questions yourself with regards to what has inspired Paulo, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We all know that you are the creator of Comiket, and you have put in a lot of time and effort to it. But I'm very curious about you yourself, Paolo. Like, what inspired you, like in your youth, your love of comics and things like that, to eventually come to this point to create something so magnificent as Comiket? Like, which comic books inspired you when you were younger, and things of that nature.
Well, first and foremost, thank you guys for having me
No,
as
thank
your
you,
guest.
thank you,
Thank
sir.
Yeah, thank you
you.
for being
It's our
here.
honor.
And so that was a lot of questions. So where do I start? Um,
What was your favorite
let's,
comic when you were a kid?
when I was a kid, I grew up with Asterix and Obelix
Ooh, very nice.
and Tintin, Adventures of Tintin,
Oh wow, yeah, you got me there. Okay.
and of course Archie. So I grew up in an English-speaking household. So it was
Mm-hmm.
all. So my grandma was reading a lot of books, and then I would copy her, and then I found a stash of my aunt's comic books of Asterix and Obelix. So that's how it started.
Very interesting. So you were never really a superhero person when you were a kid?
When I was in my teens, of course, that was the Jim Lee phase. So
All right,
I
there you
was a
go.
fan
We all
of
went through that.
X
Some of
Men.
us never got
Yeah,
out.
Mm, the
I
90s.
remember
90s.
because I
Mm-hmm.
used to live near Makati Cinema Square, and there was a lot of uh, comic books being sold there also. So I my favorite that I would remember is Mr. Miracle and Cloak
Oh
and
Ooh,
yeah.
Dagger.
all right.
And because when I was a kid, my favorite color was green, so I
This
did
was the
love
90s
Green
Mr.
Lantern.
Miracle run, just to be sure. These weren't like
Yes.
old back issues that you found? Okay, cool. Started with the more like Archie and Asterix and Obelix sort of characters. Then you eventually transitioned to superheroes. But what about now? What does Paolo Herras currently indulge in terms of geekdom? Doesn't have to be just comic books. Although I'm just assuming that's probably still your favorite thing.
Well, it is still my favorite thing.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I'm well when I started writing, I didn't know at
Mm,
that time
mm.
that I was writing speculative fiction. So all of my teachers were teaching, after all of the elements of writing, but they were pushing for either social realism or realism, and I would notice that those aren't the stories that I wanted to tell because
Okay.
childhood was really, I grew up with my grandparents and they experienced the Philippines in a very different way. I think their golden age was during the American period.
All
So
right.
Wow.
so like my grandfather is a photojournalist for Time Life magazine. So even looking at
Ooh.
his photos, it looked through the lens as if we were first world. So it was exoticizing the rest of Southeast Asia. So it was a it was a good time to be a Filipino back then. And I think that was also the reason why they brought me up that way. So when I was in high school and I got a scholarship at the Philippine Institute for the Arts and I majored in creative
Mm-hmm.
writing.
Wow.
So I studied there for a year, and that's what I noticed, that I could write beautifully, but what I was writing about was not would had zero or minimal content on culture, on my own culture, and on my own national identity. So when I got to college, that's what I pursued. So I took up comparative literature, but Philippine literature in English. And then my master's, which I didn't finish because of my thesis, But that was Philippine Studies, which is in the Filipino department in UP Diliman, which is more on cultural studies. So that one, I really did pursue learning more about my culture. And the graphic novel that I wrote and I'm still writing is called Strange Natives, because that is basically how I felt. That was my experience, that I'm a stranger in my own native land. And there's so many layers to why that is. Our language, our history, our culture was colonized, double colonized, Americanized, and now it's globalized. So there's so many layers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing that very personal part
was
of
deep,
yourself.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I did not expect such an amazing answer from you, sir. Thank you very much. Now, I believe Fred has a bunch of questions directly relating to Comiket itself.
Right. So my first question about Comiket, which has been glaring at me for years, because I've been dealing with Comiket as a comic creator myself. First, I want to thank you for creating a space for creators. There can never be
Comicet's
enough
great.
space for indie creators. I just want to thank you for that. But it's been nagging me for years, and I've never known who to ask. I've asked a few people; they didn't know. What is it with the blue cat? That's the logo of Comiket. What's the deal? Do you have a cat that's blue? Do you have a cat named Blue? Why is a blue cat the logo of Comiket?
Maybe it's a blue cat named Blue.
That's a
That'd
good
be
question.
great.
Could be.
Well, that's Comet rendered by R.D. Aquino in as one of our murals here in Comicet's headquarters. But first, it when we started Comiket, so that was when John Zamar, JP Palabon, and I were talking about Comiket and putting up a event, a space for comics creators especially when they needed a space. It We were thinking of names for the event, and we didn't want to be a copycat of Comic Con. So what we did was we figured out some names, and Comiket was the most appealing because that's at who we
Oh wait! Is it
were.
Comiket? Like Comic Cat? Like
Yes.
cat?
So that's where the cat came.
Comiket.
So the cat.
Cat, yes.
I'm the only person that didn't know that. Did you know that, Noel? Was that obvious to you?
Oh,
Okay, all right.
Heard.
how would
I feel less
I
dumb.
know?
I feel less dumb.
I mean, we should have, because it's like a cat and Comic Cat. You know,
Right, but so when I say Comic
what's this
Cat,
dumb if not dumber than you, Fred?
I'm like, oh, Comic Cat. I didn't hear. But when he said it, I was like, oh, when he says it, it kind of sounds like he's saying Comic Cat. Okay.
Well, blue is a
All
very
right.
nice
So,
color. I mean, that's the idea. That's a perfect color for a cat for me. It's my favorite. It's my personal favorite color.
Okay.
So
I love blue.
Okay, check your blood work. It's like it's statements before a stroke. Okay.
red background, and so the dominant colors of our flag is blue and red. So given a choice, we created a blue cat, and we named the cat Comet because that's the comet, the cat.
No, it's obvious now. It's totally obvious.
Comet.com. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, guys, don't tell anybody about this. This is a safe space. No one's going to see this. I completely feel isolated in our cone of comfort. All right. Okay. All right. So now, for all the people that are watching outside of the Philippines, Manila, one of the reasons, and I said this in our first episode, one of the reasons why I moved to the Philippines as a comic book creator is because it had so many venues and outlets for indie creators to actually display their work. It's not like that in the US. In the US, you'll be lucky in a major city to have one event where you could sell your work, and the event isn't all about that. But here in the Philippines, there are a lot of indie Comic-Cons, but Comiket really sort of stood out as one that really courted indie creators. So with that being said, as a creator, what is Comiket offering? What niche are you filling within a crowded Comic-Con market like here in Manila? What differentiates you?
Well, what differentiates us is that we positioned ourselves as an art market, because during that time that we launched, that was the that was the insight, that there were a lot of creators, a lot of illustrators and artists that were starting to create affordable art and sell it too. So we the established conventions back then was the local Comic Con with a K, and that's and they've been doing it for they've been doing it for over a decade at that time.
Yeah, they're the granddads. Yeah,
and the work that they did was fantastic because they created this happy place where people who could just, you know, when I started at the local Comic Con, and what I loved about it is that it was a space that I could sell my stories, and not really about the profit, but I could sell my stories to people who wanted to read them. And that was fantastic because you don't have a lot of spaces, or if any at all. It was very difficult to get published because it's very expensive to get published, and there were only a couple of publishers who were active and actively publishing comics at that time. So our positioning as a art market was with the times, and that we knew that with respect to the local Comic Con, we didn't want to copycat what they were doing, and we wanted to be different. So we wanted to position ourselves as an art market, and so that we'd be open to different types of artists and illustrators and creators, so that we could cross-pollinate in terms of our art styles and ethics, and also our entrepreneurial strategies. I mean, we'd all see what everybody's doing there, and it just became that melting pot of.
I told, as a exhibitor for the past 3 or 4 years, I can attest that's really much, that's how it feels. It feels like a club and a family that always grows. Now, you said cross-pollinate, and one of the things that sort of brings to mind is having something similar that you can go back and forth to. Comiket, for all the Comic-Cons that I know about, it's the only one I know that has continued to grow across the metro. I mean, there was Comiket, but then there was 2 Comikets, and then there's Komiket South, and then, you know, and just
North and
sort of
South
keeps growing. Right. So what Komiket Cavite, Komiket Cebu, what motivated you to start branching out around the metro?
Well, the objective and the vision of Comiket is to grow the local comics community and the original art community. So it just grew organically. So when in the first Comiket, there was like just 40 tables, and it was just one hall, and we realized that, you know, we needed to grow the creators. So we started to teach comic book creators workshops, and one of the students there, Jess Santiago, owns a book shop / cafe / restaurant in SM South Mall, and that's Buku Buku Cafe. And then she was inspired with the work that Comiket does, and was asked us if we'd like to have a smaller version there. And that's how it started. But we already knew that that was already the time when traffic was getting really, really bad. And we noticed that people didn't want to get out of their cities, because even like the way that our communities are built right now, it's like little tribes. So if I live in Eastwood or Alabang or BGC, I have everything there, and I don't need to go out. So when we realized that there are people who wanted to go but found it too far, so that's when we decided that, you know, if we insist on just staying where we are, then we'll just be talking to the same people, and that's not what we stand for. We need to grow the readership if we want to, because even as we grow the creators, but if the readers or the supporters are just the same, then it's just forming another bubble. So we had to grow the readership, we had to grow the market, and we had to go outside Centris, Quezon City, which was our home, and we started branching out. So we had Komiket South in Las Piñas, and then we had a Komiket Taguig, which is through the Fringe Manila, because we established in the same year, and we're friends with the organizers. And then I think I was a guest at the Cebu Lit Fest, and then made friends with the organizers, and they invited them to Comiket. They loved it. They wanted to also bring it to Cebu. So that's how Comiket and Cebu Lit Fest work together. And we've had, I think, three Cebu Lit Fests with them. And Fringe Manila was also responsible for the Comiket Makati. And when we moved to Mandaluyong to Mega Mall, because as we grew,
right, that was your most recent one, and that was huge.
Yeah,
you guys filled out Mega Mall. Was it hall? How many halls did you guys have?
That's impressive.
That was Mega Trade Hall 2, so that was the
huge,
biggest. So you can imagine from April 2015, we had 40 tables. We went to that first event to 279 tables. That's around
279 tables.
Amazing.
Big
That's
difference.
great. That is great.
And a lot of those tables had multiple artists.
Yes. So if you just count it on average, what's allowed is just 3, but we also had some student organization tables, which we kind of okay in terms of the 3 to a table rule.
Yeah.
So that was around 800 creators.
Wow.
And
800. Just to reiterate, he's talking about 800 different artists selling their independent art at one event.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I just want to reiterate because it can go by so fast.
Yeah. Number.
That's
a good stat.
What was
nice
the attendance? Do you have any rough estimates of how many people came? Because it was packed.
There were 9,000 people who went to
9,000 people,
and who were not afraid of the coronavirus, because that was a time
right? Yeah, well,
the day before.
Yeah, that was before lockdown. I don't want you guys to think that he's being disregarding public health. This was before the lockdown.
Yes.
It was right when Singapore declared an orange alert. So the lockdown was May 15. So March 15. So we were able to even have the Komiket Cavite in March 2 and 3.
Oh
yeah.
So we were still able to do that.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. We slid right into home base. Yeah. Now I was lucky enough to be part of that. So now, as we're closing, we want to talk about the future. Okay. Can you tell us about Secret HQ and the Pickoff Festival that just moved online recently?
So whatever effort that or project that Comiket does, it's always seeing how we could grow the community and grow the readership. So as we knew that the creators are growing, but we'd always hear that the complaint that there's not enough readers, because that's not just a comic book problem. It's a entire local publishing industry problem and a lack of readership. And Visprint was closing shop, and the shopping center burned down. So UP shopping center burned down. So there's so many factors that led to Comiket activating more as a publisher, because we do publish books, but just comic book anthologies called Community, which we gave away 2,000 copies bundled with a ticket. So if you go to Comiket, our ticket comes with a free book. And each of the creator in the book gets an honorarium for being published. So at least we are able to give back a bit of what is earned to the creators. So that's one of our efforts. And what we did was we were able to save enough to start publishing more books. And we did a call out. We followed an indie film festivals. So if you're familiar with Cinemalaya, and so we wanted to do something like that for comics. And so we did a call out. There were 100 entries, and then we interviewed 18, and we published, and we helped develop and are publishing the top 10. Well, top 11, but for the first batch, top 10. And that's supposed to be launched this year. But of course, due to the pandemic, and a lot of our income comes from events, because we're not the NGO, or we're not the nonprofit type of organization that gets donations. We have to earn every single peso.
Wendell will talk about the effect of COVID and everything in the future.
Yes, actually, Paolo, I wanted to ask you, since understandably the COVID pandemic must have forced you and your whole operations to make huge adjustments, and that's probably understating things. I was wondering, do you have any future virtual activities online that you have prepared, which Comiket is preparing at least to deliver? Because, well, I'm aware that New York Comic-Con, which will be taking place in October, well, like every other con worldwide, they've been forced to conduct all of their programs virtually online, such as their Q&A panels because of the pandemic. Do you have anything similar for Comiket in store for any future virtual projects or activities?
Yes, Wendell. I was gonna say that with the 10 books that we're publishing, we're launching it at the first Philippine International Comics Festival. So that's the next step. It's to bridge Filipino comics to the rest of the world and hopefully open doors. So it just so happened that right when we planned it, we met fellow festival directors from other countries. So there was Adam Pashon from Japan, who introduced me to Campbell White from Australia, and Julie Tate of the UK and Lakes International Comics Art Festival. And because, like, following the Cinemalaya strategy, during the time of Cinemalaya, nobody wanted to watch Filipino films. Very few wanted to watch Filipino films. And when Cinemalaya opened up, and including Cinema One Originals and the Cinema Manila International Film Festival, it grew the viewership of local films. And we wanted to have that as well, because one thing about the Filipino comics is that, you know, we may have different art styles. We may have Western, Eastern influences that we might not have a distinct Filipino art style, but we do have the Filipino spirit in the stories that we tell. So that's the answer that I will always give. Is if when somebody says, "Oh, that looks like Marvel," or "That looks like manga," or "That looks like this artist," and or influence from this artist. So that's what I would say. That's what I would say. You'd see the Filipino identity in the story, in the characters, in the language, in the concept, and that was the dream. The dream was to open doors, so that to see that, because there are a lot of Filipino talent, there are a lot of talents here in the country, and it's just bridging that to Singapore, to Malaysia, meeting other creators from Singapore, Malaysia, and Southeast Asia, and the rest of the world. We met Atomic Basement, and you'll see them all in our online version of Pickoff. So that was the goal, to publish, judge the Komiket Awards, to say that, hey, this is a good comic book. You should buy it. Because there are a lot of readers, Filipino readers. It's just that you have a lot of Filipino readers with global standards. So because when you watch a film, when you watch Netflix, you have a certain standard that you will not settle for less, especially that it's the same amount. You're still paying in pesos, right? So if there is a Filipino comic book that hits that global standard, the talent is undeniable.
Yeah.
So
That's
people
true.
are willing to to spend if it hits that standard. So
this reminds me of the interview we did with Budget 10, and I know he's worked very closely with you. So once you said Netflix, I realized okay, that's a great example. I know Budget 10 and Trece Comics has risen through the ranks within the Comiket sort of ethos and environment.
It's always great to have that recurring.
And you also see that now, of course, Shasha Zaturna, which is getting pitched as an animation TV series, and a Singaporean publisher called Epigram that published an international version of 66, which is called Mr. Tino. So you now see creators breaking through the glass that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we would just dream about, going beyond being borderless. And that, I think, is something that is slowly becoming very obvious as we are locked down. That the borders, we might be locked down, but there are certain aspects that are borderless. Your comic book can make it to France. Your story can get picked up in Singapore. And that these are few success stories, but they are still success stories that open doors for a lot of starting creators, senior creators, and even retired creators because things have shifted. We now create our own value. Before we get dictated that your value is this much, but now we can create our own value.
Yes, that's so great to know that you have that recurring theme of the Pinoy culture, which is recurrent, and as you've said, that unique Pinoy passion and empathy that's been recurring on the comics and the stories, which Comiket has been producing for the past 5 years, correct? Since 2015, since the year you guys basically began in Quezon City in 2015, if I'm correct.
So basically, from what I'm hearing, you are creating a very accessible, geographically accessible incubator for local talent to break out of the local scene and sort of capitalize on the local scene to get their work out there. So from their mind to the local scene, from the local scene to the global scene. Is that a good way of sort of encapsulating what Comicet's about?
If it works, yes. So we're just taking it one step at a time.
That's the plan. Okay.
That's the plan. And
okay.
I think that's the beauty also of being an NGO. Because if we were a corporation, if we were built as a corporation, I think it would have been a lot different. We've been more aggressive in terms of the profits, how to more aggressive in terms of prices, and I'm very happy because that was the original spirit, and that is still the spirit of Comiket. It's really in service of the Filipino comics community, and what you'd also see in our contracts ever since the beginning of our first book that we published, which was Comics Cum Laude, down to the pick-off graphic novels that we're printing and publishing, is that we are promoting creator-owned rights. So all of the creators get to keep their rights. The Comiket does not take any of their rights except the right to print the books. They are given a royalty, which is industry and the industry rate of royalty in terms of earning from the books. They're actually given advanced royalty when they sign the contract that they have to finish the book.
You also teach people about how to control and copyright and sort of and gain a understanding of what it is to create a creative work and have ownership of that.
Yes, because that's part of how we create our value. You have to know your rights as creators. Because for comic books, it's a very unique and specific group, because if we were in the children's book genre, the one who gets acknowledged as the author is just the writer, and then the illustrator just gets commissioned. But here for comic books, it's both the illustrator and the writer are credited as co-authors. So that's why it's very specific, and that's why the talks on the Pickoff this weekend is really skewered towards that that idea, because we would hear a lot of seminars, webinars about intellectual property, but it's also very it's also very general, and we're very specific. Our needs are very specific, especially that we have the capacity to have multiple platforms. Meaning to say, if our work, if we design and plan our work to be translated into a video game or a animated series or a board game or a toy, we have that it all starts with IP, and you have to copyright it. So you have to have your character, have your book as proof. So when you have that, then that already has value, and then you earn it along the way.
That's huge. You're creating a lane for artists to make money, and educating them along the way. We want to thank you, Paolo, for coming on to our show.
Thank you, Paolo.
We wish we could talk to you all night, but we know that your time and your schedule is tight. Where exactly can people find Comiket? What's your social media and stuff?
We're available at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ComicetPH.
Okay.
So at KOMIKETPH. And we have a website which we launched last Saturday.
Oh, awesome.
It's comiket.org.
Oh, we'll have to look that
up.
up.
After 6 years.
There we go. That's exclusive.
Better late than never.
Yeah.
And organic growth, as they said.
Okay.
Yeah. So
organic growth.
You'll see all the books that we're planning to publish for Pickoff. Our festival schedule is there, and the history of Comiket is also there, so that we don't lose sight of where we came from and where we're supposed to head.
40 tables.
Man, that's huge. That's huge.
And you were asking a while ago what was the future of Comiket, and how we're able to adapt. So we shifted, well, for the bookstore, for the Secret Issue bookstore, so it was obvious that we go online. So that was one. Our workshops we would do online, but again, it's still not enough. So while we're on lockdown, and a lot of our creators and illustrators, writers lost their gigs or lost their commission projects, that is something that we are now offering. So we're offering creative services. So if a corporate client would like to do a branded comic book or children's book or storybook, we could do that. So that's what we're currently offering.
Wow, great.
Management services. Man, this is crazy.
Yes.
See, you guys can be doing oil changes for artists. I like it.
I'm surprised with that.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining Talking Geek Weekly. We're so grateful to have Paolo here, and we will be talking to you guys soon. Later.
Yes. Thank you, Paolo. Thank you, everyone.